Have you ever wondered why some people who serve God face so many financial struggles? It seems contradictory, doesn't it? After all, if God is the owner of all gold and silver, why would he allow his chosen ones to go through seasons of scarcity? But what if I told you these difficulties are not punishments, but part of a much bigger plan? That's right. What many see as defeat may actually be preparation for an even greater victory. The Bible is filled with stories of men and women who, before reaching the fullness of God's blessings, went through financial deserts. Joseph was sold as a slave before becoming governor. The widow of Zarephath had to share her last piece of bread before experiencing the miracle of multiplication. What if the same principle is at work in your life? What if these difficulties are God's way of shaping your faith, purifying your intentions, and preparing you for riches that go beyond money? But be warned, there's a truth that few dare to reveal. Financial struggles also have the power to expose negative patterns passed down from generation to generation. Cycles of poverty, poor management, and even attitudes of distrust may be rooted in your family history. The good news? God not only reveals these things but also transforms them. However, this requires a heart willing to learn, grow, and trust his plans, even when they seem incomprehensible. So, if you felt the weight of financial difficulties, know that there is a purpose. In this content, you will discover the reasons behind these trials, learn to overcome them with biblical wisdom, and understand how to use them as a springboard for a future full of purpose. Ready for the revelation? Divine purpose in difficulties. The financial struggles that so many people face are rarely just about numbers. They are, in fact, divine tools carefully orchestrated to shape character. It's like the process of polishing a rough diamond. In his wisdom, God uses moments of scarcity to refine the heart and strengthen faith. Picture a potter molding clay. He applies pressure, but always with a greater purpose in mind. In the Bible, Joseph faced betrayal from his brothers and years in prison before becoming the governor of Egypt. The same God who allowed the desert also provided the manna. These stories are not just ancient accounts. They are spiritual maps for those seeking to find purpose in modern-day difficulties. In today's world, financial crises can feel overwhelming, but they have the potential to teach invaluable lessons. For example, struggling to balance the budget teaches a person to value what truly matters. Dependence on God grows as human solutions fail. In this process, something precious happens. The heart leans into divine wisdom. A practical example: use this moment to reassess your financial priorities, starting with studying biblical principles about money. Texts like Proverbs 22:7 teach us to avoid debt, while the story of the widow in 2 Kings 4 inspires trust in God's provision. These trials, though difficult, are often preparation for something much greater. The absence of immediate riches is not a curse, but rather spiritual training. Just as an athlete endures grueling training before a competition, God allows his blessings to be preceded by challenges. Imagine someone inheriting wealth without the maturity to handle it. The result can be devastating. The same happens spiritually. God shapes his chosen ones so they can be good stewards of his riches. Perhaps at this moment you are being prepared for something you cannot yet comprehend, but that will be extraordinary at the right time. And when we think about financial difficulties, it's also essential to consider how they can break generational curses. It's as if God is saying, "Enough. Here begins a new story." What seems like a personal struggle could actually be a spiritual battle with eternal impact. Cycles of poverty, when surrendered to God, are transformed into stories of victory. But this leads us to reflect on what it truly means to depend on God during times of scarcity. How does this play out in daily life? Trusting God over riches, depending on God during times of scarcity, is an act of faith that transcends human logic. After all, how can one trust something unseen when the bills pile up? This is where the power of genuine faith is revealed. The manna in the wilderness is one of the greatest examples of this. Imagine an entire people without land or resources, sustained daily by something that fell from the sky. God didn't give them everything at once, but taught them to depend on Him each day. This lesson perfectly applies to our lives today. Trusting God, especially in financial matters, means recognizing Him as the source of all provision, regardless of the bank balance. It's tempting to place our security in material wealth, but the Bible is clear: you cannot serve both God and money. Matthew 6:24. This choice often seems abstract, but manifests in daily decisions. When we face scarcity, we are forced to evaluate our priorities and redefine what true prosperity means. For example, a person might see lack as an opportunity to trust God for essentials rather than despair over the superfluous. A practical exercise is to keep a prayer journal, noting small daily provisions that demonstrate God's care, like an unexpected bill being paid or a friend offering help at the right moment. Trusting God also challenges the mindset of control that we so often carry. In times of financial crisis, our tendency is to seek quick fixes, but they are not always the best solutions. God invites us to rest in Him, even when everything around us seems uncertain. Think of Peter walking on water. As long as he kept his eyes on Jesus, he accomplished the impossible. But when he turned his gaze to the wind and waves, he began to sink. The same happens when we place our trust in money or our own efforts. The lesson? Trust the guide, not the path. And if this trust is so powerful, why is it so difficult? Perhaps because it requires total surrender, something our hearts often resist. However, when we entrust our finances to God, we make room for the extraordinary. Financial miracles happen when we acknowledge Him as the owner of everything. But this raises another question. How do we deal with the absence of wealth while awaiting these greater blessings? Preparation for greater blessings. The absence of wealth is not divine punishment, but training for something far greater. God, as a wise father, prepares His children so they are not consumed by their own blessings. Think of David, who spent years fleeing in the wilderness before ascending to Israel's throne. This period of hardship was not a punishment, but an opportunity to shape his character and teach total dependence on God. The same principle applies to financial life. Current scarcity may be forging in you the maturity needed to handle greater resources without being overtaken by pride or materialism. When God withholds something, He is also teaching. Imagine a child receiving an expensive toy, but without the maturity to use it carefully. The result is predictable. The toy breaks. Similarly, God does not pour out riches on someone whose heart is not prepared to handle them. Use this time of scarcity to learn fundamental principles like good stewardship, generosity, and gratitude. Start small. A simple financial record of income and expenses is an excellent training tool. This kind of financial discipline, combined with the wisdom of the Bible, such as Luke 16:10, "Whoever is faithful with little will also be faithful with much," demonstrates the preparation necessary for great blessings. Furthermore, periods of financial difficulty force us to reflect on our true motivations. Why do you seek prosperity? Is it to satisfy selfish desires or contribute to something greater? God examines the heart, and blessings come when our intentions align with His purposes. Consider the story of Solomon, who asked for wisdom instead of riches. God not only granted his request, but also gave him material abundance. Similarly, ask yourself, am I ready to use future blessings to expand God's kingdom or merely to satisfy my own desires? This preparation also serves as protection against the danger of mismanaged wealth. Materialism can be a trap that diverts the heart from God. But by enduring times of scarcity, you develop gratitude, humility, and a sense of responsibility. Thus, when blessings come, they are received with the right heart and used for the right purposes. But this brings us to another question. How can financial difficulties interrupt cycles of generational poverty and bring about true spiritual transformation? Breaking generational curses. Financial struggles often carry an invisible weight, cycles of poverty repeating from generation to generation. However, God specializes in turning curses into blessings. Think of Gideon's story. He came from a poor family and lived under the oppression of his enemies, but God called him to break those patterns. Similarly, many of the battles we face today may be a divine call to interrupt destructive cycles that have plagued our families. Scarcity could be the beginning of a new story, where obedience and wisdom lay the foundation for a lasting legacy. Breaking these curses begins with conscious and spiritual decisions. First, it's crucial to identify repetitive patterns in your life and family. Are there constant debts, a lack of planning, or even a spirit of discouragement regarding the future? The Bible teaches that my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Hosea 4:6. This applies to both spiritual and practical knowledge. This applies to both spiritual and practical knowledge. Studying finances in the Bible, for instance, can reveal transformative principles, such as the power of giving and avoiding greed. An initial step might be organizing your household finances and teaching future generations to manage resources with wisdom and gratitude. Another essential aspect is intentional prayer. Generational curses often have spiritual roots that need to be addressed in the realm of faith. Declare words of victory over your family, reject thoughts of defeat, and cry out for divine revelation on how to change your current reality. God honors the faith of those who seek Him. As a practical action, dedicate one day a week to gather your family in prayer, seeking guidance and discernment on how to break these cycles. Small gestures like this can create profound and lasting changes. And as these patterns are broken, something wonderful happens. You become an instrument of transformation, not just for your family, but for your community. People who overcome financial difficulties with faith and wisdom have the power to inspire others to do the same. But this journey also reveals something deeper, how tests of faith and integrity shape our character for the next level of spiritual growth. Tests of faith and integrity. Financial difficulties are not merely challenges to overcome, they are tests that reveal true character. It's easy to trust God when everything is going well, but genuine faith is forged in the fire of trials. The Bible is full of examples of people who were tested to prove their integrity. Job is the greatest symbol of this. Even after losing everything, he maintained his trust in God. In our finances, we are constantly faced with choices that test our values. Do you choose honesty when handling money, even when no one is watching? These small acts of integrity determine how prepared you are for the blessings God has in store for you. Tests also expose our intentions. Why do you seek prosperity? To show off or to fulfill God's purpose? It is during trials that we learn to align our desires with God's designs. Imagine someone who, in the midst of scarcity, decides to be generous, sharing the little they have. This person demonstrates a pure heart, tested like refined gold. A practical example is practicing offering even during times of difficulty. Often, God uses these gestures to open unexpected doors and show that true wealth lies in depending on Him. Furthermore, financial tests teach us the importance of prioritizing God's kingdom. Matthew 6:33 reminds us, "Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." This verse is not just advice, it's a call to action. When we face challenges, we are forced to decide what we will prioritize, our own concerns or the mission God has entrusted to us. Set aside time weekly to reflect on how your finances can impact lives and support causes that honor God. Finally, it is through difficulties that we learn character is worth more than any material possession. God does not seek perfect people, but sincere hearts willing to grow. Each decision during a difficult moment is like a brick building an unshakable tower of faith. But as we overcome these tests, the question arises, how can we ensure that future blessings are used to expand God's kingdom? Now that you know the reasons behind financial difficulties and the divine purposes they carry, the question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you continue seeing challenges as barriers, or will you start viewing them as opportunities for transformation? Remember, every difficulty is a hidden lesson, a chance to grow spiritually and prepare the ground for blessings that truly matter. Look at your life and ask, am I being faithful with little? Am I learning the lessons God wants to teach me? Perhaps it's time to reassess your priorities, adjust your plans, and align your finances with God's purpose. But do this with faith, knowing that God is faithful and honors those who trust Him. Start small. Practice generosity, organize your finances, and set aside time to seek wisdom in the Bible. These simple steps can open doors to extraordinary changes. And now, I challenge you. Take the first step today. What habits do you need to change? What patterns need breaking? Don't settle for what's comfortable. Pursue the transformation God has for you. The greatest wealth isn't in numbers, but in the purpose you carry. How about starting to act now and building a future that reflects the wisdom and revelation you've received? If this message touched you, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you won't miss any content. We are here to walk alongside you on this journey of learning and transformation. Leave a comment about what impacted you the most today. How about becoming the change that inspires others? To live this communion, it's essential to create moments of quality with God. Think of prayer as a conversation with a close friend. It involves sincerity, patience, and attention. A simple and effective practice is starting your day with a time of silent prayer, handing over your concerns to God and seeking His guidance. Another idea is meditating on a Bible verse or passage throughout the day, allowing the Word to inspire your prayers. These actions establish a spiritual rhythm that strengthens your trust and faith, making God a constant presence in your life. Communion with God through prayer also renews our strength and provides clarity in times of uncertainty. When faced with difficult decisions or seemingly insurmountable challenges, it's through prayer that we find comfort and direction. An example of this is Jesus Himself, who often withdrew to pray, seeking the Father's will before making significant decisions. Following His example, we can transform prayer into a strategic practice for our lives, asking for wisdom, discernment, and courage to face whatever lies ahead. What's most wonderful is that this communion doesn't depend on elaborate or perfect words. God knows our hearts and values sincerity above all else. As we deepen this relationship, we realize that prayer is a two-way street, where we learn to trust God's timing and plans. And in this learning process, we discover that His mercy is the inexhaustible source that sustains our spiritual journey, an essential theme to explore next. Prayer and the mercy of God. The mercy of God is one of the most incredible characteristics of His love, and prayer is the channel through which we can experience this grace in its fullness. Imagine a father who always welcomes his child back, even after repeated mistakes. That's how God is, whose compassion is renewed every morning, as described in Lamentations 3:22-23. In prayer, we find not just a place to expose our failures, but the certainty that we are heard and received with mercy. This understanding transforms prayer into something deeper, a trust-filled exchange where our faith is strengthened by God's unchanging love. This mercy invites us to be honest and vulnerable before God. There's no need for masks or fancy words, as He already knows every part of our hearts. The practice of confession, for example, is a way to experience this mercy. When we acknowledge our mistakes and ask for forgiveness, God not only cleanses us, but also enables us to start anew. A simple exercise is to set aside moments in prayer to reflect on the day, identify areas where we've fallen short, and surrender everything to God. This process not only brings relief, but teaches us about the greatness of divine compassion. What's most beautiful is that God's mercy isn't limited to our individual failures. It equips us to be instruments of His grace for others. Just as we are forgiven, we are also called to forgive. Imagine the impact of showing mercy in difficult situations, such as dealing with someone who has hurt us. Prayer gives us the strength to forgive and act with love, even when it seems impossible. This reflects God's heart and transforms not just our lives, but also the lives of those around us. Finally, prayer reminds us that God's mercy is a continuous invitation to draw closer to Him. No matter how far we've strayed or how much we've failed, there's always a way back. This mercy sustains our journey and motivates us to remain in communion with God. And as we conclude this journey of reflections, we are called to put into practice everything we've learned, living a life that testifies to God's love and faithfulness. So now, what will you do with everything you've learned? It's not enough just to know. Real impact happens when we decide to act. Each topic explored here is an invitation to transform your life from the inside out, starting with something essential: loving God above all else. And this doesn't mean perfection, but prioritizing, trusting, and surrendering to the love that turns the impossible into miracles. Are you ready to take that step? Take a moment to reflect. Which areas of your life have you not fully surrendered to God yet? What is occupying the place that should belong to Him? Maybe it's the worries of everyday life, the dreams you haven't handed over, or even the doubts that persist. Don't be afraid to trust, because God is faithful and never fails. If you're seeking direction, transformation, or even a fresh start, the answer is putting God at the center of everything. And now I challenge you. Start today. Choose a moment in your day to pray, reflect, and surrender your decisions to God. It can be something simple, but rest assured that He sees and values every gesture. Then come back here and share in the comments what you've experienced. Together, let's build a community of faith that supports and grows in love for God.